Hello everyone.
Hi there, welcome back to Book Club for Telescola. We are your hosts. I'm Mr. Darrell.
And I am Miss Maka.
So Ms. Maka, we're talking about one of your favorite authors today.
Yes, Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, and the story is The Centerville Ghost.
So in this case, did he decide to terrify us?
Yes, well, he wrote a humorous ghost story.
Yeah, and actually it was the first of Wilde's stories that was published, appearing in 1887.
An early story. I always like seeing the early work of writers sometimes.
And actually this is one of the most interesting part of the writers, how they developed themselves during their lifetime. But of course, before we start talking about the book itself or the author, let's look at the agenda. Firstly, Mr. Darrell and I will present you the vocabulary that we need today. After that, we will talk about the author, Oscar Wilde. And later, we will introduce you to the summary of the book, tell you shortly what is the book about.
And as you know, a very important part of the summary are the characters. And we'll talk about that. We'll move on to the setting as well, the when and the where, and then express some of the main ideas of the story.
Yeah, and finally, we will never forget to give you the homework.
Very good. Let's move on to the vocabulary list. The first word is, it's an adjective, it's haunted. Haunted. To be inhabited or frequented by ghosts.
მოჩვენებებით დასახლებული.
Our next word is a noun, bloodstain. Bloodstain. A spot or stain made by blood in carpet or tables or anything.
სისხლის ლაქა.
Our next noun is dimension. Dimension. This is a measurement in length, width, thickness.
განზომილება.
Our next verb is to humiliate. To humiliate. This is to cause a person painful loss of pride, self-respect, or dignity.
დამცირება.
Our next word is trick. It's a noun, trick. A crafty or underhanded device, maneuver, or strategy to get something you want in a crafty way.
ხრიკი, ეშმაკობა.
Our next noun is vulnerability. Vulnerability. Willingness to show emotion or show one's weakness to other people.
დაუცველობა.
Our next adjective is desperately. Desperately. To behave in a way that shows an urgent need or desire in yourself.
სასოწარკვეთით, უიმედოდ, როცა რაღაც ძალიან გინდა.
And our last word is to reside. To reside, it's a verb, to live permanently or for a considerable amount of time in a place.
სადმე ცხოვრება, ბინადრობა.
Well, Ms. Maka, let's move on to the author, Oscar Wilde.
Yeah, let's start.
So he was born in 1854 in Dublin, Ireland.
An author, poet, a playwright, was a popular literary figure in late Victorian England.
He graduated from Oxford University and he lectured as a poet and as an art critic.
And in 1891, he published one of the most famous, and actually the only novel. This is Dorian Gray's Portrait. And from the very beginning, it was considered as the immoral piece of work by Victorian critics, but is one of the most notable works now, as a dramatic many of Wilde's plays were very, very well received, including his satirical comedies.
Upon graduating from Oxford, Wilde moved to London to live with his friend. There he continued to focus on writing poetry, and he published his first collection of poems in 1881.
Okay, beginning in 1888, Wilde entered a 7-year period of furious creativity. So when I read about this, I imagine a writer writing very quickly so that he does not forget whatever he's going to write, during this period, he produced nearly all of his great literary works. That same year, he published his first and only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray.
One of your favorites.
One of my favorites and one of the books that we have already discussed.
Okay, and Wilde died of meningitis in 1900, the start of the 20th century. He was only 46, so quite young. But after more than a century from his death, he's remembered for witty, imaginative, and beautiful artworks.
Those are the adjectives I would always use while talking about Mr. Oscar Wilde.
Very good point. Let's ask a question to our audience now. Oscar Wilde's novel was considered to be immoral in his own time, but now it's considered a classic. Why is that so?
I think that happens when a book proves to be a true classic. It goes about worries and fears of its own time and speaks to universal audience that is not limited by narrow cultural expectations.
I do agree with you, definitely. So the book had a true message for that time, and that was appreciated later on in the history.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of classics will be produced now, like in our time.
I don't know, there are still lots of main themes that the writers can use.
And it's hard, it's probably hard to predict what can become a classic and what won't become a classic.
Of course, it's really hard. Now it is time to introduce you to the summary of the book. So the story is about an American family who moved to a castle that is haunted by the ghost of a dead English nobleman who actually killed his wife and was then walked in and starved to death by his wife's brothers. Kind of revenge. It has been adapted for the stage and screened several times.
The story actually begins when Hiram B. Otis and his family move into Centerville Chase, an English country house mansion, despite warnings from Lord Centerville that the house is haunted.
Yeah, and Mr. Otis says that he will take the furniture and the ghost as well at valuation.
So he's not afraid?
Is not afraid at all. And the Otis family includes Mr. and Mrs. Otis, their eldest son Washington, their daughter Virginia, and the Otis twins.
Mischievous little boys, as I remember. At first, none of the Otis family believe in ghosts. But shortly after they move in, none of them can deny that there is actually a ghost in the house.
At first, when Mrs. Otis first sees the blood stain on the floor, she has this kind of reaction that she doesn't really care about the blood stains in the living room.
Very practical-minded woman.
Yeah.
Now, so this is a humorous horror story, so it's not really a scary story. And some examples of the style of humor. Here's one example. Washington Otis, the eldest boy, suggests that the stain can be removed if he uses the latest marketing product, Pinkerton's Champion Stain Remover, and also Paragon detergent. So he's kind of being like he's not taking it seriously.
Yeah, and after that there is the first appearance of the ghost where Otis just gets out of his bed and very pragmatically offers the ghost some kind of rising sun lubricator to oil his chains.
The chains that a ghost kind of sometimes has traditionally.
Yeah,
they were making a noise.
And it would be funny can you imagine a person just seeing the ghost and offering something?
Because the sound is annoying him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, angrily, the ghost, whose name is Sir Simon, that's his name, throws down that bottle and runs into the corridor. He's disappointed with his first attempt to scare this family, and he can see that something's going wrong. He's not scaring them. He thinks of the previous successful times in previous centuries when he was able to scare the owners and residents of the house.
Yeah, and despite lots of efforts from the ghost to somehow frighten the family refuses to be frightened, and Sir Simon feels increasingly helpless and, let's say, humiliated.
I would be too if I was a ghost.
Me too.
And no one was scared.
Of course, of course.
Sir Simon schemes, plots, plans, but even as his costumes become increasingly gruesome, so he puts on more and more scary things, nothing scares the house guests. In a particularly comical scene, he himself is frightened by the sight of a ghost that the mischievous twins fix up for him.
Very interesting. But later, I see it as even a funnier scene when the ghost starts to tell about his private life and tragic life. The ghost tells Virginia that he has not slept for 100 years and he really wants to do so. He reveals to Virginia the tragic tale of his wife, Lady Eleanor de Canterville.
Sir Simon de Canterville says that she must weep for him, for he has no tears. She must pray for him, for he has no faith. And then she must accompany him to the angel of death and beg for death for this ghost.
Yeah, she does weep for him, and she does pray for him and bids the ghost farewell. The story ends with Virginia marrying the Duke of Cheshire.
So a bit of a happy ending. Well, now, I think it's time for a question to our audience.
Yes. So, the ghost is clearly shown in a satirical way. What do you think Wilde's purpose was in doing this?
I think clearly Oscar Wilde was not a superstitious man, and that he wanted to show how such things as the emotion of fear can also be funny and also unimportant in the larger world of human life and understanding.
Very nice point. Definitely this can be one of the reasons, and also later on we will tell you more reasons why he uses this type of satirical way to show the ghost.
Good point.
Thank you very much.
Let's move on to a look at the characters now. We have Sir Simon de Canterville. He is the ghost. He is the most colorful character in the story, although as the story goes on, he starts to feel helpless and humiliated.
So he really tries to frighten the family with the theatrical methods, some melodrama and flair. In a particularly comical scene, he is frightened by the sight of a ghost reached up by the mischievous Otis twins.
This ghost sees himself as at times brave, frightening, distressed, scared, and finally depressed and weak.
Yeah, and he finally can only connect with a 15-year-old girl, Virginia.
So we have basically a depressed ghost.
We have a ghost that readers might love instead of being frightened of.
Or feel sorry for.
Feel sorry, yeah, right. So our next character is Hiram Otis. So the American minister of the court of St. James, pragmatic, unsentimental American.
And that's something we'll pick up in main themes. Then we have Virginia Otis. Virginia is different from everyone else in the family. And it is a large family, but she's the one that's different. And only Sir Simon the Ghost recognizes this. Virginia's ability to accept Sir Simon leads to her own enlightenment.
Later in life, she says that Sir Simon helped her understand what life is, what death means, and what does it signify, and why love is stronger than both.
Well, profound lessons. Unlike the rest of the family, Virginia does not dismiss the ghost. She takes him seriously, and she listens to him and learns an important lesson as well as the true meaning behind a riddle that comes up.
Our next character is Mrs. Lucretia Otis, a very handsome, middle-aged woman who had been seen as a celebrated New York belle, like beauty.
She expresses this modern American culture of that time. When she sees the ghost, for example, in one situation, the ghost is screaming to try and scare her, but her reaction is to suggest that the ghost might have kind of a stomachache and suggests giving him medicine for the stomachache.
That we can see that she expresses an interest in joining the psychical society to help her understand the ghosts.
So she wants to kind of psychologically understand the ghost. She's not afraid. She thinks of him as a patient or something.
Maybe she wanted to create another job like psychologist for ghosts.
Good job. Mrs. Otis is given Wilde's highest praise when he says about her, indeed, in many respects, she was quite English.
Interesting.
Okay, we have a question for the audience. Which character do you identify with more from the list of characters we explained? The pragmatic Mr. Otis or his more sensitive daughter, Virginia Otis?
I like the pragmatic viewpoint of the Mr. Otis, and there is the way I would like to be if I were in the ghost story, and I think there is not enough time to live any other way.
Okay, so well, very good answer. So she believes in pragmatism.
Yeah, just like Mr. Otis. Now it is time to see the setting, where and when the story happens.
Yeah. Now the when, it happens in 1887, towards the end of the 19th century. Wilde was a contributor to journals, literary journals, in 1885 to about 87. Right at that exact time he wrote the story. And he enjoyed reviewing and doing journalism, and it suited his writing style.
Yeah, he could organize and share his views on literature and life generally, yet in a format less tedious than lecturing.
So he didn't like to be in the
like the public eye, maybe.
While, like his parents before him, also supported the cause of Irish nationalism.
Yeah, and now it is time for the where part, the Centerville Chase mansion. So the home of the Centerville ghost is the ancient Centerville Chase, which has all the elements to be called a haunted house.
Elements such as the library paneled in black oak, so black walls, the armor, the suit of armor, the medieval suit of armor in the hallway, all this kind of medieval haunted castle elements.
And we could say also the technique that the writer uses. Oscar Wilde mixes the macabre with comedy. So he uses traditional English ghost stories such as some kind of creaking floorboards, clerking chains, and some kind of prophecies. It's interesting, right? So that creates
to mix the comedy with the horror.
With the horror, exactly. Okay, so we have a question to our audience now. How does Oscar Wilde show the humor in his setting?
As you mentioned, Wilde mixes a horror story with a satirical, cynical outlook, and that the horror becomes dark humor.
Interesting. So, do you like dark comedies, Mr. Darrell?
Yeah, I can think of a famous dark comedy movie, Beetlejuice, if you've seen it.
No, I haven't.
It reminds me very much of that movie.
Interesting. I would later watch it, definitely. Okay.
Let's move to the main themes now. And our first main theme is the comparison between American culture and British culture by Oscar Wilde. The Americans in the story, the family, the Otis family, who have moved to this British castle, they're very pragmatic and they're unsentimental. The ghost Sir Simon schemes and plots, but even though his costumes get even more scarier and more frightening, nothing makes this family scared.
Exactly. He falls victim to tripwires, toy pea shooters, butter slides, and falling buckets of water. In a particular comical scene, he is actually frightened by the sight of a ghost reached up by the mischievous twins.
So the Americans are presented as pragmatic, and the British are presented as traditionalists. Now, maybe he was trying to make a point about general society at the time. pragmatism is a better response to life.
Can you just imagine a child who sees an American child who sees the ghost? What would be the first comment?
According to Oscar Wilde, he would probably laugh at the ghost.
Hello, ghost, something like that,
Something
right?
like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we are trying to tell you from this main theme. So the next main theme is theatricality and performance. So it is easy to imagine him as a comical character in a stage play.
The ghost, yeah.
The ghost itself, yeah. Of course, Oscar Wilde was a playwright, and I think he saw it this way, yeah? So he saw the character on stage. The ghost has the ability to change forms, so he taps into his collection of tricks.
Like an actor in a stage play who changes costume every now and then, the ghost does the same thing, apparently.
Yeah.
That ghost takes on many different roles. He takes on the headless earl, the strangled babe, the bloodsucker of Bexley Moor, suicide skeleton, and the corpse snatcher of Chertsey Barn. All of these are supposed to be slightly humorous as well, and the thing is that they worked in previous centuries, but now in this new modern time of Oscar Wilde's time, it's not working on these new Americans.
They have to change their methods, I would say. Okay, now let's ask a question, Mr. Dell.
Yeah, let's ask a question. Why is there such a strong element of the theatrical in this story?
I think there is a strong element of the theatrical because Oscar Wilde was a playwright too, and he may have had a very theatrical personality which found its way into this and other stories of his.
Very good answer.
Yeah,
So, as you were saying.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So I guess that's all from the discussion part, and now it is time to wrap everything up that we have spoken about. So the first thing, we talked about the author, Oscar Wilde.
Then we looked at the summary of the story. Basically, it's a story of an American family that moves to this castle and are not scared by the ghost.
Then, of course, the characters from the story, the Otis family, never frightened by the ghost, and the ghost itself, who is really funny, who makes the story funny.
Very theatrical as well.
Very theatrical, yeah.
And the setting of the story, the late 19th century, and the mansion is the Centerville Chase Mansion.
So the main themes, these were the American culture versus British culture, and theatricality and performance.
Very good. Let me review some of the words that we looked at the very beginning once more. They were haunted, bloodstain, dimension, to humiliate, trick, vulnerability, desperately, and to reside.
Interesting. Thank you very much. And now, what about the homework, Mr. Darrell?
We have this question for you. Oscar Wilde combines the genres of comedy and horror in this story. Combine two other genres which wouldn't normally go together in a single story, and explain how you would do it and why.
Am მოთხრობაში ოსკარ უაილდი აერთიანებს ორ ჟანრს, კომედიას და საშინელებათა ჟანრს. გააერთიანეთ ორი ისეთი ჟანრი, რომელიც ზოგადად ერთმანეთთან შეუსაბამოა და ახსენით როგორ და რატომ გააკეთებდით ამას.
Very good, Ms. Maka. And they can send those answers to the address you see on the screen right now.
დავალებები შეგიძლიათ გამოაგზავნოთ ეკრანზე მითითებულ მისამართზე.
So, well, Ms. Maka, that's another work by one of your favorite authors that I think we had a good discussion on.
Yeah, and that's because he is one of the best ones.
He's a master.
Yeah. So thank you, the audience, for your interesting answers.
And thanks to the viewers for watching us, as always.
So we now have to say goodbye to you. Have a nice week, and see you next week.
Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.